The Battle of Kursk was the last blow that forever changed the balance of power on the Eastern Front. After this defeat, the Wehrmacht could not recover, and the initiative finally passed to the Red Army. A lot of materials have been written about the battle by Soviet historians, but it is worth listening to the opinion of the opposite side. Today we will tell you what the German military historian and retired Colonel Karl-Heinz Frieser thinks about these events. The biggest battle in the history of mankind. Can the Battle of Kursk be considered the largest battle in history? Yes, this statement is completely true. In August 1943, 4 million soldiers, 69,000 guns, 13,000 tanks, and 12,000 aircraft collided on the Kursk Bulge, Frieser notes. Why did Hitler decide on Operation Citadel? By the summer of 1943, Germany had already suffered heavy defeats on the Eastern Front, finally lost Africa, and the Allies were preparing an invasion of Italy. However, despite this, Hitler decided to launch an offensive near Kursk. In the summer of 1943, Germany managed to concentrate all its forces on the Eastern Front for the last time, as at that time the Allies launched an operation in Italy. The German command feared that the Soviet offensive, which could begin with the Battle of Kursk, would escalate into an avalanche that would be impossible to stop. Therefore, it was decided to launch a preemptive strike to prevent this avalanche from moving, explains the German historian. Why did Hitler agree to Operation Citadel? The summer of 1943 was a critical moment for Germany. On the Eastern Front, the Wehrmacht was losing the initiative, and the Allies were preparing to land in Italy. However, despite the difficult situation, Hitler decided to launch an offensive near Kursk. Hitler approached this decision with great caution, explains Karl-Heinz Frieser. The High Command of the Army insisted on the operation, seeing in it a chance to stabilize the Eastern Front, while the High Command of the Wehrmacht objected, considering the strategic risk too high. Tactical and operational tasks were solved near Kursk, whereas in Italy it was about preventing a war on several fronts. As a result, Hitler chose a compromise. The operation was to begin, but it had to be stopped immediately if the Allied landings in Italy escalated into a crisis. The most famous episode of the Battle of Kursk was the Battle of Prokhorovka, which took place on July 12, 1943. Soviet sources called this place the Cemetery of German Tanks, claiming that 400 Wehrmacht tanks were destroyed here. But how does this correspond to reality? There is an opinion that 850 Soviet and 800 German tanks collided near Prokhorovka. Frieser comments, this battle has indeed become a symbol of tank battles. But the facts tell a different story. There were 186 German and 672 Soviet tanks on the battlefield. The Soviets lost 235 tanks, while the Germans lost only 3. Although Soviet propaganda exaggerated the successes of the Red Army, the Battle of Prokhorovka remains one of the largest and most dramatic episodes of the war. The last major tank battle took place in Hungary in 1945. This battle, later called the Grave of the Panzerwaffe, finally buried Germany's hopes of restoring the strategic initiative. The Soviet generals made almost every possible mistake possible during the Battle of Kursk, which, according to Karl-Heinz Frieser, was caused by the tight time frame set by Stalin. The incorrect calculations of the Soviet leadership led to disastrous consequences. For example, the attack of the 29th Tank Corps ended tragically. The Soviet tanks fell into a pre-prepared trap, behind which were German tank forces. The result was deplorable. 172 of the 219 tanks of the Corps were lost, and 118 of them were completely destroyed. By the evening of the same day, German soldiers towed their damaged vehicles for repairs, and the damaged Soviet tanks were simply blown up. After the British troops landed in Sicily, Hitler made the unexpected decision to transfer the 2nd SS Panzer Corps from Kursk to Italy. This decision caused a lot of controversy, as these tanks were urgently needed on the Eastern Front, and there would not have been enough time to redeploy them anyway. However, Hitler was guided not by military, but by political motives. He feared that his Italian allies, already under pressure, might collapse, which forced him to sacrifice part of his forces in the east to support his position in Italy. July 1943 was the time when the world witnessed one of the largest battles of the Second World War. The Battle of Kursk is often seen as the turning point of the Great Patriotic War, but is this really the case? Karl-Heinz Frieser argues that neither the Battle of Kursk nor the Battle of Stalingrad were real turning points. In his opinion, the key episode of the war was the Battle of Moscow in the winter of 1941, which put an end to the Blitzkrieg strategy. In a protracted war, the Third Reich, suffering from a shortage of resources, especially fuel, had no real chance of defeating the Soviet Union, which also received substantial support from the United States and Great Britain. Even a German victory in the Battle of Kursk, according to Frieser, could not have changed the outcome of the entire war. Despite the controversial points in Karl-Heinz Frieser's interview, he was right about one thing. Germany had the only chance for a quick victory, which was missed at the beginning of the war. The Wehrmacht proved powerless against the Red Army, which managed to regroup and strengthen its forces. After the Battle of Kursk, it was pointless to talk about Germany's military victory. The maximum that the Germans could achieve was to receive a temporary political bonus and the opportunity to negotiate with the Allies. However, even if successful at Kursk, the Wehrmacht would remain pinned down on the Eastern Front, while the Allies continued to smash Italian troops, and Germany lost the industrial war with the USSR from the very beginning.